Hi and welcome back to my channel. In this video we have the next episode of, I almost said recent reads. This is the next episode of my SCASL project. I thought for sure that I had filmed this episode and accidentally only did 5 books instead of 8, but I couldn't find that footage anywhere, hadn't uploaded it, anything like that, so I get to stay right on track. I have to say before I start getting into the books that I had sort of lost a little bit of my drive for this project, and I thought maybe I won't finish it. I'm just not as into it anymore. Then the current state superintendent of education announced that she was cutting ties with SCASL, South Carolina Association of School Librarians, for all of the typical talking points that you would expect of someone of that particular political ilk. As someone who is a lifelong learner, an educator for about 10 years, and someone who has seen firsthand the effect that books have, both personally and for my students, I have a big problem with the villainization of librarians. Because of that, it has renewed my appreciation for and my drive to complete this project. I have a lot of opinions that I could give about this action, about the reasoning behind this action and similar actions from political actors in other states. However, I technically work for the state, and I am supposed to limit what I say politically, even though this is my personal channel, freedom of speech, etc. I'm making sure that I'm keeping everything copacetic here, and I'm speaking as a personal citizen, private citizen here. I'm not speaking for the state. I'm going to leave that aspect of the SCASL interesting journey aside, and I'm going to talk about the books. I'm also going to mention that my dehumidifier is running, and hopefully the noise isn't as loud as when I film in my other location, but if you see the lights flicker and the noise turn on, that's because the dehumidifier is running again. Alright, so now let's get into the books. In this segment, I have 3 middle grade books and 5 young adult books to talk about. And thankfully, they're not all bad. They're not all great either. There's a mixed bag here, but I'm really interested in seeing how these books interact and looking at it overall. And I am one step closer with this. I'm very close to having enough books read for the 4th episode in this as well. So let's start off with the middle grade books. For that one, and the reason why I'm sitting on this side is so I can put the stats up, because I no longer have the library books with me. Because of the time it took to read 8 total, it was not worth it to hold on to the library books until that time came. So I have my images here for you to look at instead of the actual book itself. Let's start with An Occasionally Happy Family. This is a book where in my recent reads, I talked about how strongly it resonated with me because of personal reasons and some things that were going on in my family at that time. And I don't know that it necessarily would have resonated as strongly with me otherwise, but in this book, it is a father, 2 children. The mother died a couple years ago from cancer, I believe, and they are going on a summer vacation, and on this summer vacation, they end up meeting a woman that their dad has been seeing and they didn't know anything about. It's a very short time frame, but it's told well, and I really enjoyed the sibling dynamics between the main character and his older sister. Now we get to the rating overall. I gave it an average rating for appeal. I gave it a 3 stars for appeal. I don't necessarily see anything strongly drawing a middle grade student to it. I also don't see anything pushing them away from it. Hence a 3 stars for that. When it comes to the literary quality, again, a lot of the resonance and reason why I liked it so much was more personal. Literary quality wise, it's average. It's not exceptional. It's not terrible. Hence, a 3 stars for literary quality. Same goes for characters and for the plot. Everything was average. It felt good. It fit. It worked. It was an overall average, fairly well done book. Hence why it got 3 stars. Nothing jumped out at me, and I had to keep that in mind considering my rating of this. I gave this a 4.5 star rating. And when I was making these ratings, I did have to keep in mind that a lot of the connection that I felt with this was more personal, was things that just hit at just a certain point. The second of the 3 middle grade books that I read is Flight of the Puffin. This one really surprised me. I don't know that it should have, because I have read this author's first book, her debut book, the title of which is escaping me. It has something to do with an octopus. But in this book, you have 4 main characters, 2 on one side of the country and 2 on the other, Vermont and Seattle, I think. And it's told throughout their perspectives and their connections. And the way that Anne Braden weaves together the different issues that these kids are dealing with is so well done. It pulls on your heartstrings. It really gets you engaged. I definitely teared up a couple times, hence the 4.5 star rating for this. But when it comes to the other things that I evaluate this on, for appeal, I don't know necessarily that this sort of a cover, we do pick things up based on cover, and title would get kids interested in it. They're definitely going to wonder, what on earth is a puffin? And Flight of the Puffin, is this some sort of nature book? I don't think necessarily that has as strong of appeal, hence the 4 stars. But then when you get to all the others, plot, characters, literary quality, this definitely was a notch above a lot of the other things that I have read for this project in the middle grade area. Words are not coming very easily to me right now. And so for that reason, I rated this one 4 stars for those 3. So all told, An Occasionally Happy Family got a 3.5 stars. Excuse me, got a 3.3 average rating. Not too bad. And then Flight of the Puffin got a 3.9, which when you put everything together, that's pretty good. Unfortunately, the third of the middle grade books that I read, I think is one of the lowest, if not the lowest, that I have rated for the middle grade section. And that is Now You Say Yes. And I had a few problems with this. One of the reasons why I rated the appeal a 2.5 stars is because the main character is not actually middle grade age. She's 15 and she's driving. This is not really something that a middle grade student is going to have any connections with. There's this whole thing going on about who are these different books being written for, and I think that the target demographic for this book, it was misdirected. And also the cover, it doesn't really draw me in, and I don't think it would have that sort of a draw for a middle grade student as well. This book, some of the problems came with the characters themselves. Well, a lot of the problems came with the characters themselves and some of the believability. There was a lot of representation put into this book. A lot. It's like the author was just throwing out all of these different types of representation, and I don't really think he had any place to be writing about these, because I went and I looked up his bio and I could not find any sort of connection or anything that would say that he has sort of an input, a buy-in to this different type of representation. And I know that it's putting a lot on the author to say that you have to have some sort of connection. You have to have some sort of buy-in or something that says, yes, you can write about this representation. It's not like saying you have to have XYZ things happen to you to be able to write about that. I mean, all fantasy authors would be like, yeah, well, I can't write fantasy anymore. But when you are writing so much into a book, you really need to have some sort of expertise or lived experience or connection to portray that representation accurately without making things worse. And I don't think this author did that. And so for that, literary quality, like the actual structure of the book, was not terrible. So it got a 3 stars. The characters themselves, as I look at my rating here, I think I'd actually knock it back down an entire star. So the next time you see this list, the average is going to be even lower. I don't know why I put 3.5 stars. I think that may have been a mistake when I was making this, because I'm pretty sure for characters I put 2.5 stars, and that was one of my biggest issues. And then plot, the plot stretched the suspension of disbelief way too far. I'll go into that in my recent reads when I talk about this book, and so hence 2 stars. And then my overall enjoyment, it just barely scraped a 3 stars on Compile, and that's only because some of the mechanics held true. All right, shifting a little bit to the YA books. I'm going to start with one of the worst of either group, and that is A Lesson in Vengeance. It didn't make my worst book the month that I read it because I kind of expected it to not be great based on other reviews and things that I heard. It's sort of dark academia, but again, it stretches that suspension of disbelief way too far. I was able to go along with it for a little while, but then ultimately I went, no, I can't buy into this anymore. It doesn't make sense to me anymore. As far as appeal goes, dark academia, those are big buzzwords, especially around the time that this was published. And I think the idea of having something sort of witchy, sort of like the super smart mystery aspect of it, I think it is going to have an appeal. Hence 4 stars for appeal. As far as literary quality goes, when you push that suspension of disbelief, you sacrifice a lot on literary quality. Hence 3 stars for that. Then when it comes to characters, I did not like these characters at all. 2 stars for that. And then the plot, again, that suspension of disbelief is key. And a lot of the plot choices made no sense. So I couldn't give it above 2 stars for the plot. And then my overall rating for this book, what it scraped through in Compile, was a 2.5 stars. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my information here. And so overall, A Lesson in Vengeance was a 2.7. I had hoped that the book next door to that in my ranking here, Lies Like Wildfire, would be the lowest. Unfortunately, we had A Lesson in Vengeance. Next, we have one that surprised me because I did not put very high expectations on it. It's sort of a romance sort of book. I really enjoyed reading it on the heels of A Lesson in Vengeance because, again, you had a type of school for really smart high schoolers. Lesson in Vengeance was more like the arts side of it, and the quantum weirdness of The Almost Kiss, that was more on the math and science end of it. And it was sort of like a breath of fresh air when it came to how that was portrayed a little bit more realistic. Appeal-wise, romance is a big seller. I've seen a lot of my students reading romance. Granted, I've seen a few of them reading Colleen Hoover, but we'll leave that aside for right now. So appeal-wise, this is definitely going to be appealing, hence 4 stars for appeal. When it comes to literary quality and characters, again, they were average, nothing extraordinarily good, nothing extraordinarily bad, which means 3 stars for both literary quality and characters. When it comes to plot, I really like how the author laid out the plot and how one of the main characters was dealing with interpersonal issues with both how she related to other people and to her family. I thought that was well done. And for that reason, I did give it 4 stars. And then my average rating ended up being a 3.5 stars, which again, fits with what I expected for this book. So overall, this one gets a 3.4 stars. Next, we come to a book that, again, I did not expect much. I checked out this book multiple times, sent it back to the library, got it again, 3 or 4 times before I finally read it. This was a book that I did not look forward to reading. It lived up to those really low expectations. and that is Enduring Freedom. This is a novelization of real life experiences by these two co-authors. They didn't do a great job with the novelization of this. Certain things fell off. It did not read like a young adult book. The American character, when he is over in Afghanistan, he's 18, 19, 20 years old. And clearly when the real life person is writing this, he's writing it from a more adult mindset. And he's past those years, obviously. And when it was talking about the military aspect, there was a lot of disconnect. The point of view that saved it was the Afghani perspective. That being said, that just saved it from being less than a 2-star overall in rating. So, appeal, I think there might be a little bit of appeal because it's war type stuff, but there's not a lot being drawn. I think this would have had more appeal if it had been published 10 years earlier. So I was a little torn on that, so I gave it a 3 stars for that. Literary quality, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. So I gave it a 3 stars. I waffled on that, but I gave it a 3 stars for that. Characters, again, they were fairly flat. Not a lot of development, but they weren't terrible. Hence I landed on 3 stars for that. This one was hard to come up with the ratings. The plot was awful. The plot was not well structured. So 2 stars for that. And then my personal rating. I was very surprised by this, but it scraped a 3 stars in Compile. Basically because they did enough to not be terrible. But overall, that brings its average to 2.6, which is the lowest thus far. Hopefully the lowest total out of all 20, but we shall see. And lastly, we come to the one where when I looked at the list initially, I thought, is this a young adult book? How is this classified as young adult? It's not technically published as young adult. However, after reading it, I can see, okay, yes, I think it's still okay to recommend for young adults. I don't see any problem. I think the writing level, etc., is accessible for that. I didn't dislike it as much as I thought I would, but there was a lot of stuff that I just went, no, that's not how that actually works. It wouldn't work that way. That's not believable. Appeal-wise, because Andy Weir is so popular and The Martian was turned into a movie, I think there's going to be more appeal here for that. So I gave appeal 4 stars. Literary quality, again, average. It's not terrible. It's pretty decent. So I gave it 3 stars on that. Characters, the character of Rocky definitely redeemed it for me. And I did not like Rylan Grace. Really didn't like him. Totally unbelievable. Don't even get into all of the teacher parts that he brought into it. But because those two characters balance each other out, 3 stars for that. When it comes to the plot actually had decent structure. It was pretty compelling. I didn't like the epilogue, but that's a minuscule effect on the plot. So I actually rated the plot 4 stars. So on all of those, it ended up doing a whole lot better than I thought it would. My personal enjoyment was a 3 star. A higher 3 star than I expected, but not high enough to get a 3.5 star. So that brings Project Hail Mary's rating to a 3.3. So there you go. There are the 8 books that I talked about in this episode of SCASL. I'll see you next time, whenever that comes, for the 4th and second to last installment. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.